Most of us have heard the principle that we should always seek support for major doctrines from a variety of passages in Scripture. The reason for following this principle is that it's easy to misunderstand a single biblical reference. One way to confirm that we've understood the claim of one passage correctly is to show that the same claim is repeated in other parts of the Bible. In other lessons, we've spoken of theological certainty using a model that we called the cone of certainty. We noted that responsible Christian theologians are not simply interested in determining what to believe, but also in coordinating the strength of their convictions with the strength of the evidence for those convictions. In many respects, this is why we collate verses that repeat the same theological fact. When we cannot find repetitive scriptural support for a proposition, we should normally lower our confidence in that proposition. But seeing a fact repeated over and over in the Scriptures is an ordinary way we can gain more confidence. As important as repetitive collation may be, systematicians also collate biblical passages to form composite support for a theological proposition. In other words, systematicians find various factual claims throughout the Bible and collect these to form larger, multifaceted theological assertions. Let's illustrate the process of compositional collation with an example from everyday life. Imagine that I'm about to go outside, and I hear thunder and suspect that it's raining. How do I confirm that suspicion? Well, one way is to notice other things that confirm it. When a friend comes running in and is drenched with water, I'm more convinced that it's raining. If my friend hands me his wet umbrella, then I'm even more convinced that it's raining. And then if he says, "It's raining cats and dogs outside," I'm going to be so fully convinced that I won't even think about going outside without my own umbrella. These observations are not repetitive. I hear thunder, I see my soaked friend, I touch his umbrella, and I receive an explicit report. Each one of these evidences contributes something different, and together they compose evidence that convinces me that my suspicion was true. In many ways, systematicians follow a similar pattern of compositional collation. They note that one thing is taught in one passage, then they notice that another related matter is claimed in another passage. Then they find other passages that teach other relevant ideas. Then they gather all of this information together to form a theological proposition composed of all of these theological facts. To see how this process works, let's return to Berkhof's discussion of the deity of Christ in Chapter 8 of Part 1 of his Systematic Theology. We've already seen that he noted the repetition of explicit claims that Christ is divine when he said that the Bible explicitly asserts the deity of the Son. But his theological proposition that Christ is fully divine is also supported by compositional collation of related but different claims that he discovered from many parts of Scripture. He continued in this way: the Bible also applies divine names to him, ascribes to him divine attributes, speaks of him as doing divine works, and accords him divine honor. Berkhof's conclusion that Christ is God was not based on any of these claims individually, but on the aggregate of all of these theological claims. It isn't difficult to understand why Berkhof did this. The belief that Christ is divine has been challenged by many interpreters of Scripture. So it wasn't adequate simply to show that some verses explicitly assert his deity. He wanted to confirm that he had understood these verses correctly by adding the support of other considerations. The fact that the Scriptures attribute to Christ divine names, that they ascribe divine attributes to him like omnipresence and omniscience, that they speak of him doing things that God does, like creating and sustaining all things, that they give him honor that is due only to God, like worship and prayer. These biblical factual claims come together to compose compelling evidence that Berkhoff had a true theological proposition, the proposition that Christ is divine. So it is that systematic theologians form theological propositions from the Scriptures, first by reducing their focus to the facts asserted in biblical passages, and second, by collating passages from various parts of Scripture. By these means, systematicians are able to have confidence that they have formed theological propositions that are true to Scripture.